Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm just going to wait for a few minutes for people to join us. And this is the Bath MBA Masterclass. So, very warm welcome to all of you. I'm delighted that Professor Dimo Dimov will be hosting this session for us. He's going to be talking about focus on navigating the future, which is a module that our students are about to undertake. So Professor Dimo Dimov is an expert in strategy and organization and professor of entrepreneurship and innovation here at the University of Bath School of Management. So Dimo, I'm going to hand over to you to have your session. We welcome questions. You'll see a chat box, a Q&A box, so please do feel free to put questions in there and we will answer the questions at the end of the session. And so over to you, Dimo. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here and to share some thoughts this lunchtime, UK time zone, on navigating the future. What a grand title! I felt the pressure, the burden of delivering something that lives up to the title, and I hope what I share with you over the next few minutes will resonate, and this will give you an overview of this new module in the MBA program called Navigating the Future, which is quite exciting, and I hope you will find it too. So to kick off, let me just pose the question: what is a world with no future? Think about that. What that probably means is that it is a world of certainty. It is a world where nothing changes and life is pretty much revolving around a very predictable routine. In a world like that, there is nothing to hope for. And I know this may sound bleak, but the point is that it seems sometimes, often, that we're trying to build precisely this kind of world. So let me take you 20 years ago, and it was a feat of financial engineering. This was right before the global financial crisis, for the few years before. Financial engineering created synthetic instruments. So these were collateralized debt or mortgage obligations, and they seemingly removed uncertainty. So what happens is, through a process of securitization, we pull together risky mortgages and certain mortgages, and they're bundled together into very, very neat buckets of tranches of things. And some of these were actually very clean, AAA rated output. So for all intents and purposes, the mess comes in, and what you have at the other end is certainty. And so these were products that were being sold precisely for that kind of certainty of this AAA-aided output. But needless to say, this seemed to be an illusion, and so there was an illusory logic that lied behind that, and this is that uncertainty wasn't removed; that it actually remained hidden, and this is what gave us this feeling of certainty because we could no longer see it. So the risk was still there; it was just invisible, and in fact, it was a systemic risk. It was sitting underneath and underpinning everything. And it had been repackaged. And this was so convincingly done that we couldn't see the risk anymore until that synthetic certainty met reality. And we know exactly how this story ended. Now, what is even more interesting is that this process, a quest for certainty, is actually going on. And this is something we're doing at the moment with AI. And we could say that AI at the moment is an attempt to securitize thought. This is what we're trying to do. And so we have patterns that are being bundled into very clean outputs that give us very confident answers. And the uncertainty around the process of trying to get to the answer, the underlying reasoning, that gets stripped away. So we no longer feel the weight of not knowing. We no longer feel the pressure of not knowing because answers are so easily available. So we get confident about answers without the difficult thinking that underlies them. And this is something very interesting. The question is, where does this lead to, and what does this amount to? So I'd like to ask you to think for a moment what did it feel like in moments where you felt genuine uncertainty about what to do? Where you can't really rely on habit or something that's familiar and ready intuition, where you really had to feel the pressure of not knowing. So think about that, linger for a moment, and perhaps there was fear. Was the fear of the unknown. But at the same time, I imagine that there could also be an excitement about what might be or what might happen. So, and with that comes a thrill of potential surprise when something pleasant or unknown, surprising could happen. So this is a tension where fear and thrill, they go together. But this is not a problem that we need to resolve. It is actually what being at the frontier looks like. And the image you see here on the left is an image that I use to illustrate the idea that I call the edge of reason. What does it mean to get to the edge of reason? What lies beyond the edge? And sometimes it feels like that stepping beyond the edge is like stepping into the abyss, and we might fall into our perish. But when it comes to thinking, reasoning, and knowledge, what happens when you take a step forward is precisely that this is where surprise occurs. Surprise occurs when we step into the unknown. It wouldn't be surprise otherwise if things were fully known. So this is the feeling you get that we're at the edge of what we know, and the edge of reason is really a grand summary of the total wisdom that we've developed up to this point. But of course, wisdom is constantly evolving, so there's a lot more new things to be happen and to be learned and developed. And that only happens when we're curious and we keep asking questions. So the bottom line here is that uncertainty is generative, and in fact, not knowing is a precondition for original thought. Now, it's interesting to think about what happens when we have too many answers and they really come before we ask interesting questions. So the analogy I try to use here, the metaphor, is this is akin to shutting all windows, and we're just operating in this building that now we're breathing, keep breathing the same air. There's no new air is coming in. So one of the critical functions that leaders should play in organizations is to ask questions and not really settle for answers. And when they do that, they open up the space. They project uncertainty as a space where we can project our imagination and our curiosity. But what often happens in organizations is in a hierarchical structure is leaders or managers sometimes want to extract commitment from us. They want to make sure that this is what we can do. We want to give them certainty of what we can deliver. And so what happens is that similar to the collateralized debt obligations, the synthetic securities that we're being creating, we're pulling these commitments together and they begin to float up to the level, the high level of the organization. So what you get at the top is the synthetic certainty of all these pooled commitments. But at the same time, the uncertainty that goes with each commitment kind of floats down and sits with people at the front line. And so this is actually what I would call a pathological separation between commitments and this counter baggage of uncertainty. And of course, the synthetic certainty at the stuff is a way of stifling curiosity everywhere in the organizations. So let this be a call for, we need to open the window. We're opening the window, we're letting uncertainty in, we're letting this fresh air, which fuels our curiosity and imagination. So the bottom line is uncertainty is not a bug. To be uncertain is to be alive and conscious and hopeful for the future and what the future might bring. In fact, neuroscientists describe consciousness as felt uncertainty. So think about that for a moment. We could also say that there's more joy in hoping than in knowing, than in actually knowing. So hoping for what might happen versus knowing what will happen. If we actually know what will happen, that kind of eliminates the joy to a certain degree. So with more uncertainty, we have more creativity and we have more room and possibility to create something genuinely new. So to repeat again, uncertainty is not a bug. It is the raw material of original thought. And with that comes the tension, and this is a tension between confidence and humility. Every time we have a tool, and powerful tools at that, that gives us confidence. The more powerful tool, the higher the confidence. But at the same time, with that confidence, we have to recognize that we need to retain humility. And it's the humility of not knowing, the humility of asking questions, the humility understanding that we might be wrong. So a powerful tool can tempt us to close the window too soon, to thinking that we have all the answers. And this is what AI is doing at the moment, and that is particularly acute. And so we have to resist that temptation by energizing, making sure our humility remains active. So the way we do that, this is a question of what we might call a meta skill, and that's is it forces us to think about the way we think in trying to avoid some kind of premature closure, settling for questions too soon. So meta skill, meta thinking, this is a really interesting area. And in an age of AI, this is kind of well expressed by one of my favorite quotes. This is by Martin Omeyers in his book, Meta Skills. And we often think about machines thinking like humans, but the danger is what I'm trying to convey is that humans will begin to think like machines. This is where this is a certain way of kind of imagination, curiosity being kind of taken out of the equation. So the practical question is, how do we keep asking questions? When all the tools that we have, they give us a lot of that premature closure and the confidence of having all the answers. So why asking questions if we have the answers? So meta skill is about developing a cognitive flexibility to reflect on how we think, to reflect going into situations, whether the thinking with which we go into those situations is the one that perhaps we need to change. So we're not to rely on habit, not to be automatic. And this is a fundamental aspect of the navigating the future model. It's the undercurrent, this developing this metacognitive flexibility. And one of the things that the students have to develop as they go through the course and engage with content in very different areas is to have that reflective ability on the way they think. So the undercurrent of the module, and this is, as you'll see, opens up a frontier for how we think about the future, is what I might call a thinking tune-up. And so the question with a thinking tune-up is going into this, you think, well, my thinking style or the way I think is something that I can't really see because it is habitual, it happens automatically. I go into situations and I just see them in a certain way and I do certain things. And that's what it means for thinking to be invisible, what it means for us to operate out of habit. It takes quite a bit of effort and self-reflection, and this is what metacognition is, to make that visible, make that thinking visible, and in a way that we can say, I can now describe and understand what my thinking is. And this is a precursor to the next step, which is we can begin to think about thinking as something intentional, that we can prescribe for going into certain situations. So, as I said, this is the undercurrent of the module, and let's now do something, a small step in that direction. So, I would invite you to you have the menti.com. You can scan the QR code, or just go to menti.com and type the code that you see, and you're going to see questions, two questions, and I would like to answer those and just be honest in where you position yourself in between two very valid and good endpoints. So there's no right answer here. This is about providing an honest assessment of where you are, and this gives us a picture of what we have among you as an audience. So let me give you a few moments to complete that. This simple assessment or a diagnostic, if you wish, this is a first step of trying to go from habit to making something visible. And so what you see on the screen is the average across all of you. But if I hover here, as you can see, there's quite a diversity around the room, and we have some new responses coming in, and this will update automatically as they come in. So there's a lot of diversity around us, which means we already think differently. And we'll begin to realize that perhaps we need a language to describe what these differences are in thinking style. And this is what the framework, in this case, kinetic thinking framework, has been developed for this. And the assessment as part of the module is a little bit more sophisticated and robust. And we have some people who are, could be focused thinkers, so they like to rely on structure and reason when they deal with situations. Some people are more playful in those same situations. Others would be more open or incremental in their style, reasoning logically, but having more openness in what they perceive. And a breakaway way of thinking has to do with a combination of being playful as well as open in what we see. So the interplay in the way we should think about thinking style is the way our metacognitive apparatus works in trying to decide what we see and what we do in certain situations, the situations that we face. And what we see and what we do and not automatic things. These are judgments that we make on the basis of the habits that we've developed. Sometimes when it comes to seeing, we're focusing on what is there and we look for structure. Sometimes we focus on what's not there, which is a question of imaginations. Sometimes in deciding what we do, we rely on reason. We focus on having logical steps and a clear sense of where this will take us. Sometimes we rely on play as a no reason. We do things for no reason just to see what happens. And this is what play is. And of course, we know that children do that very well. They're very playful. And that's why we see them as curious and imaginative, and they really do extremely interesting things. So this diversity of thinking that we see here, and now that we have a language to describe what that is, we can begin to become prescriptive in how we approach new situations where we say, okay, I tend to be focused here. Perhaps I can be more playful, or I tend to be too open and too breakaway, and sometimes a little bit of focus is going to help me out. So this kind of assessment or diagnostic becomes not a sense of the way we are in a fixed way, but it becomes a pathway for personal development. It opens up a new vista in terms of where we could go with our thinking and what is the deliberate effort that we can do in achieving that. So this is, I say, this is the undertone to the unit and the module navigating the future, and it's that developmental pathway that is built into this. So we actually seek to develop and expand our range of how we think in different situations. So this is about expanding our range and not really replacing and moving to a different default. So being a kinetic thinker is having the flexibility to look for structure, so trying to arrange things in a certain way. So this is one type of move. A different move would be to try to imagine things. So we look at possibilities in openness, and perhaps in different situations. Sometimes we look to evaluate things and really deploy reason, or sometimes we want to explore, and this would be a playful move. So this capacity to navigate the future is really not a knowledge problem. When we think about navigating the future, this is not a knowledge problem, but it's a thinking style problem. So navigation is, the more flexible we are, the more interesting and productive and pool of possibility is the navigation. So we to summarize the point here is we have default thinking or cognitive orientation, and it takes metacognitive effort to try to unlock these and to move from the structure and the automatic nature of habit into something that is more intentional as we engage with new situations. And in the module, we do that where we can explore a range of things that are happening in different spaces, so trends and developments in whether it's responsible leadership or technology or economics. And out of that raw material, we can begin to think, where could that take us? So we begin to think about the future in a more open sense. So one of the fundamental goals of the module is to develop what I might call future readiness. To be ready as a futures thinker is to be developing in terms of these four areas. So one is I've intuited so far. To be future ready is to be open to uncertainty, to tolerate uncertainty. So this means that we need to develop comfort with ambiguity, asking questions rather than settling for answers. So this is what it means to not seek closure too quickly. Systems awareness, this is the ability to see connections rather than isolated trends. The more we see things as connected, the more we can understand why certain things emerge and why there's sometimes change is so difficult to achieve. But that systems thinking allows us to appreciate that. Agency orientation is it's almost a fundamental premise for future making, if you wish. If you view the future as something that is shapeable through action rather than something that is inevitable, then we will be more open to act and take step forward. If we think the future is something inevitable, then we might say, well, what's the point? And then we put all our effort into prediction and trying to anticipate what that future is so we can actually position ourselves against it. And this is very much a different thing than thinking about the future as something that we could shape. Of course, we cannot change the world through our imagination or the single action that we do. But all we know is if we don't take any action, nothing happens. So if you think of this in very simple terms, is that acting actually infinitely increases your likelihood of success. Why? Because if you don't act, the likelihood of success is zero. And if you do act, it's something that is greater than zero. And that's actually an infinite increase in your chances. And so the final aspect of future readiness is this idea of temporal flexibility, which is our ability to think across different timescales. We focus on the present, but we can also think about the way things might be 10, 20 years into the future, but we can also go into the past and understand where we have been. And the saying that those who don't know history are bound to repeat it kind of is applicable here. There's a lot of lessons in history. And if you think about what history is, it's actually a series of past futures, so to speak. So a series of past presents. And this is a constant moving and evolving thing. So let me bring this together. What would you take away from the module or in thinking about the module? This is the idea that it is not navigating the future is not about the future as something that we want to think about, as if it's the future is a single thing that is going to happen, something that is predetermined, and our role is primarily to anticipating. So this is not about training you to find answers faster or particular answers, because in a very blunt sense, we could say that AI has already won the race. They can give us much faster answers than the best of us. They're good at that, and a lot of the answers may seem very confident. So we're developing the capacity instead to sit productively in uncertainty. So it's not about thinking about the future, but it's about futures thinking, which means there's no one future, there's multiple futures. And the more futures we can identify and imagine, the more productive we can be, the more novelty there is to be, and the more possibilities we can work with. So this is about asking questions, reframing problems, and also having the ability to exercise judgment when a lot of the assumptions that models make, whether these are computational or even financial models, when some of these assumptions may be wrong. So we have to have the ability to respond to situations like that. So in summary, the future needs people who can ask better questions and hold these questions, stay in the ambiguity of the questions for much longer than feels comfortable. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dimo. That was a really fascinating look into our module, Navigating the Future. I would encourage audience, please do use the Q&A box to put any questions in there that Dimo can answer for you. So I'll be monitoring that. So Dimo, whilst we're just getting people to catch up. That was a lot of information, a lot of thoughts. I know my head's whirring a bit. So you're teaching this on our full-time MBA program at the moment to our students. What sort of response do you get? Because it's a new concept, isn't it, for many people to sort of be confronted with this uncertainty, and it's quite a difficult position for people to be in if they've come from a very structured, background through education and through their workplace. So how do our students tend to respond, and what do you enjoy about the experience of teaching people and seeing them develop and grow?
It's a great question, Becky. I mean, it's what you see at the beginning is precisely that kind of struggle with someone who's used to operating in a very structured environment where the point is to find the best answer and to make things work. You could call that an engineering mindset. I see that with engineers in particular who come in, and so they're trained to take something and to make it work. And in the process, this needs to be structured and developed in that way. And of course, if we then engage with someone who would come from an art background and say, well, actually, what you see is never what it is. And part of art is to develop new ways of imagining and new ways of describing what something is. So you have these people coming from different backgrounds into the classroom, each with their own settled or default thinking style, to use that expression. And then you have the epiphany as part of this personal development that happens is one is recognizing that sometimes when we argue about things, a lot of what is behind the argument is this differences in thinking, different the way we approach a situation. And once we have this language of trying to describe the thinking that we have, we realize, well, wait a minute, we're arguing because we're thinking differently. What if we try to think in a more synchronized way? So let's all be focused here. Let's all be breakaway or playful in that. And so that language gets adopted very quickly. And then you see in some of the reflective assignments, the writing that the students would do, and they say, oh, actually, I realize, given my background, I was a lot like this. Now I can see that there's many different ways of doing that. So you can see that shift, which is precisely the personal development that we like to do it. And that for me is the most enjoyable thing. And sometimes when you've done this many times, you know that shift is going to happen. And at the beginning, you see the discomfort among the students, and you try to tell them this shift is going to happen. I cannot tell you how, and I cannot tell you when, but I just know that you'll be different at the end of the module. I can't tell you what the pathway is, and it's very difficult to take that in. But in a way, you have to say, "Well, trust me," and go through the module. And then at the end of that, inevitably, people say, "Yes, we are different. We don't know when and how this happened, but it is." So this is the ability um, to just let go and go with the flow, and trust that this will take you to a more productive space. So you can't really know everything in advance. That's the whole point.
Yeah, oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. And going back to your idea of children play, and I guess that's it, isn't it? We're so trained not to be children anymore, and maybe we need to reintroduce some of that into our world. So we've got a couple of questions coming through on the Q&A. I'm just going to read them out loud. How does this approach hold up in high pressure environments where decisions need to be made quickly with maybe incomplete information and competing priorities?
Uh, it's fascinating questions. It'd be interesting to know what the high pressure environment. There are different high pressure environments, and so I would have to qualify this. A nuclear plant is a high pressure environment, so that's not an environment where we want to be playful. So that's where there's certain environment. This would be an example of a high reliability organization where we have to really do things at a very high reliability. Well, obviously there we can't really go for that kind of playfulness. So the question is really what the high pressure is. Is the high pressure because if something goes wrong, the consequences are really devastating? Is it that kind of pressure? That's the high reliability. Or is the pressure simply because the organization is driven by achievement and meeting stretch goals and all that? And so the pressure is to deliver, where not delivering doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. And so that's the first qualification that we have to make. But then what is interesting in those high pressure environment is then, do we want people to make judgment and take a risk? You have to look at what is the reward structure of the organization. In certain high pressure environment, the reward structure is that if I take a risk and if it doesn't work out, I get penalized because I have not achieved performance. So the immediate consequence of that is no one wants to take a chance because no one wants to risk being rated not very well in terms of performance. And so the result is we play it safe, and we play it safe by being very incremental in what we try to do. And it's the incremental thing that can give us more confidence. In a high pressure environment, you want to be more confident. This is what a high pressure environment rewards. And the more confident you become, the more you forget about the humility and the tension that I outlined, then there are all these things that fall by the wayside. And so the question then for an organization is, how do we make sure that humility is something that we reward? How do we recognize that in taking a risk, things may not work out, but there's a lot of learning to develop? How do you reward somebody for having taken the risk but not succeeded? And that recognizes, in line with the systems thinking that I outlined earlier, that success is not down to us. Success, there's a lot of other things that success depends on. So in a way, it can come down to, well, we need to be lucky. There's a certain degree of luck that needs to operate. And in a lot of that, we recognize that luck is actually a big part of the picture. Whereas a lot of high pressure environment would actually recognize it, would say, well, luck doesn't have any place here. And of course, that would be it. So I would see this as a very much like the securitization that is happening, which we're creating synthetic certainty. And there's some systemic questions to be asked.
Great, thank you. And a question from Arpish. If I believe quest for certainty is what drives curiosity, and that comes from being in uncertain situations. So how do we fully understand that we are not settling for premature closure in our quest, and the certainty that we have achieved is absolute?
Well, again, another very interesting question is that I would say that what drives curiosity is not necessarily the quest for certainty itself. It's a quest for knowledge and a quest for understanding. And this quest for understanding, the best way to, I guess, the best image to understand that is with the idea of a horizon. If you look ahead, there is a horizon, and we try to reach the horizon. This is what, if you're an explorer, you think I need to reach the horizon. And at some point, you realize that no matter how much you travel forward, the horizon is always ahead of you, and that it kind of never disappears. So you never reach into that stage, but you keep going. It's just you never reach it. So full and complete knowledge is in that sense like a horizon. It's not an illusion, but it's a driving force of what. So complete certainty never gets achieved, but we keep knowing more and more and more. But there's never a sense where we could say that we fully know the world and fully know how everything works. It's an ideal that drives that curiosity, but it's something that we never achieve. And so, kind of in a funny way, this is a bit like your email inbox. There never comes a time when that inbox becomes empty, even though this is what we constantly try to do. And they just realize that the more we try to clear it, more stuff comes in. But we're in that process of we keep going. We have a sense of why, and that's useful. But remove the horizon, and that's like removing the future, and that can remove hope and curiosity. So it's a very interesting idea. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. And I would encourage anyone to put any more questions in. We do have one more question in the chat, but we will finish the session if there are no more questions coming in after this question. So the question for you, Dimo, I really like the concept of developing metacognitive flexibility. How does this show up in practice for individuals in their day-to-day work? Where do you see thinking evolve in students most over the course of the module?
Again, another very, very good question. It's one of the trickiest questions to handle in a way, because we have a tendency to consider that if I'm thinking, I'm not working. So
Mm.
to be metacognitive, to develop that flexibility means that you have to reflect, think about yourself in a way, think about it in the way that you think, and think, just consider for a moment, how does that look for an outside? You walk by my office, and I'm sitting in my office, and I'm just, for all intents and purposes, I'm staring into empty space. But what I'm really doing is I'm playing. There's a lot going on in my mind. Of course, you cannot see it from the outside. So if you're someone who thinks, oh, I'm walking by and Dimo is just staring at the wall and he's not doing anything. He's not being productive, to use that word. And so it's that idea that thinking is actually not working. And so if we're thinking, we're not working. Therefore, let's try and fill up the day with activities that we consider productive, and therefore we leave no space for thinking. Now, if you consider that thinking is actually working, and I would say that the main job of a manager, a leader, is actually to think. There's very little that we actually physically do in terms of moving pieces around. A lot of what we do is we communicate ideas. So a lot is communication. Communication is concepts. So we try to get ideas to people, get ideas in terms of how we organize and how we work. So this is very much a thinking activity. And the question then on a day-to-day basis is, what space do we leave aside as part of our daily routine for thinking? And the more we make space for that and recognize that thinking is working, then that cognitive flexibility that would come naturally. But what are the conversations that we have around that? So interesting ways to begin to develop organizational cultures.
And I guess also the thinking about that, people often say they wake up in the middle of the night with lots of thoughts. And I wonder if it's because we're not spending enough time in the daytime thinking about things. When you go to sleep, that's when your brain is then processing things. And maybe that's why we wake up at night. So maybe this is a chance for everyone to have a pause in their day and to think a little bit more. Thank you. So, two more questions have come in. So, the first one, Dimo, how is futures thinking different from prediction?
Again, great question. So prediction is trying to answer the question, what will happen? So prediction is a way of settling on what you would consider to be the most probable future. And a most probable future, in a way, what you try to do is we're extending the status quo, and we're basically saying, if things are going, if all these trends that we identified, if they're just going in a way that without being changed or without any intervention, this is where we're going to get to in the most probable sense. So prediction tries to answer the question, what is the most probable future? But futures thinking allows us to appreciate that in addition to the most probable future, there's also a future that is plausible, less probable, but it's still plausible. And there are futures that are more possible, so not maybe less plausible, but still possible. So futures thinking allows us to appreciate what some describe as the cone of uncertainty. The further ahead you look, the wider the range of things that could happen. So there is a space of possibility. Within that, certain things are more plausible than others. Within that, certain things are more probable than others. And then so we have the prediction is kind of, we want to be right in the middle of the most plausible thing. But we're then, so it's like shining a torchlight in the darkness. So we get the really, really bright patch in the middle. But what the light does is it diffuses, it illuminates a much wider range of things. So the question then, how do you go from predictions to futures thinking, is we want to appreciate, the broader illumination rather than the bright beam. And then the other element that we want to add to that is a question of desirable futures. So whatever the prediction is for what is most probable, and whatever our appreciation is for what is possible, there's a question about what is a desirable? What's the one thing that we want to happen? We want to make happen. And sometimes that can be adjacent to what is most probable. Sometimes there could be a sense that if things just go the way they are, think about climate change in the moment and the way we understand that things are evolving, and we want it to be different, but somehow, we're not taking that collective action to do that. And what desirable is a way of reinforcing, say, well, actually, this is what we want to work on. We just want to mobilize the people to work towards. So much broader in scope than prediction. Prediction wants to narrow things down, settle one thing. And if I give you five options, the prediction will say which one of these would be. So you want to answer of one. Whereas futures thinking is about, well, let's entertain all five and maybe we consider which of these we want to do, which is a different type of question that we ask.
Yeah, great, thank you. How can we make decisions if futures are fully open?
Well, let's think about what decisions are. What a decision is a way where you could say, here is what I need to do to achieve a certain, in this case would be achieve a certain goal. So a decision in a way is validated by the goal. Now the goal would be two things, and that actually relates very well to the previous question. If the goal it has to do with anticipating what will actually happen. So if this is relative to prediction, then in a way a decision is tied by what the predicted outcome is. We just want to make a best decision in the light of that. If the goal, however, is driven by a desired future, desirable, where we decide we want to work on things based on different values, we want the world to be different, then that by itself gives us the ammunition, gives us the weights to weigh, well, certain actions more than others. So even though the future is fully open, what we might want and what might be desired is not fully open, because given our values, given our aspirations, we can still define a more bounded realm of what we want to do. And it's that boundedness that gives us the ability to make a decision. But appreciating that boundedness is what frees things up and makes things interesting.
Thank you. Right, a question from Andrew. How do you see the use of AI impacting the course, given AI has instant answers? Won't this stifle curiosity?
Well, again, another excellent question, and I would think, I mean, here the use of AI is actually more productive. For all the confident answers that AI can give us, the AI would never tell us what the future holds, right? So that's not a question that AI can answer. They can answer a question, and if you prompt it in different ways, it could give you the more probable scenario, or it can give you a possible scenario, even if it may not seem very plausible. So in that sense, AI is a tool that we can use to cater to our goals of enhancing futures thinking. So yes, it does give instant answers, but these answers are actually functions of how we prompt it. So if we prompt AI to give us possibilities to open things up, to help us answer better questions, it can help us with that. If we prompt it to give us closure, sorry, the first one was questions. If we prompt it to give us closure and to answer things in terms of what will happen, it will give us an answer to that as well. But AI can be quite productive when we try to imagine certain future scenarios, and we want to make these compelling. They may be compelling to us, but not necessarily to others. So part of the futures thinking, future making skills is how can we tell a story about the future to others so they would find that inspiring and they would come along. So how can we mobilize them to the stories that we tell? And sometimes there's a failure, limits to imagination in trying to imagine what certain really counterintuitive futures may look like. And so that failure imagination, there's a failure of ways of how can we describe this because we don't have the language to deal with that. Well, AI can be quite helpful here because, if you turn a little bit of a poetic mode, it can give us ways of start expressing ourselves that can become quite compelling. So we can give it something and say, let's make this more powerful. Let's make it more imaginative. Let's make it more inspiring. So this is a tool that we can leverage in very interesting and productive ways.
Great, thank you. And a final question from an anonymous person. How does this module fit within the broader MBA structure? Does it act as a foundation for the rest of the program or something that builds? I guess it could work either way.
It could work. It could work either way. Well, let me see. If you think of a corporate, a business structure, and we're very familiar with this functional separation, right? We do marketing with finance and accounting and HR and operations, so these are verticals. And a lot of the foundations of an MBA program is to make sure that we are fully masters of all the verticals. Often coming into a program, we have experience in one of these verticals, but in our aspiration to become a general manager or and beyond, we need to be comfortable in all the verticals. So once we develop all the verticals, this is kind of the siloed knowledge of each discipline. The question is, how do you bring these things together? And one of the ways to bring them together is through a module like this. So think of this as a collecting device where all these insights from the different modules are coming in. They're brought together in trying to tackle questions around futures. When we try to mobilize towards a certain future, we need to know all the expert knowledge that comes from the verticals, so to speak. So you can think of it as a capstone. It can serve as a capstone thing where everything comes together, and it allows us to tackle problems and questions and issues that are not within the realm of any of those fundamental disciplines, if that makes sense.
Yeah, somebody said to me once, it's a bit like the spine of the program, the way it interacts across the board. And I think what's really important is the way that we've redesigned the MBA program to be much more interactive. So the sessions aren't just teaching the verticals in isolation, they are bringing them together. And I think the Navigating the Future is sort of the overlay of the top of all of that, that really helps it come together. And actually, interestingly, your final sessions are the very final sessions of the whole of the program as well. So it really is finishing the program with that whole future setting, I suppose, which is really important for our future leaders.
Yes. Yeah, the spine idea is very interesting because the spine is a way of reminding you where this is all going and how it all fits together. Sometimes when you get into the nitty-gritty of functional specialisms, it's always nice that along the way these things come together and you never forget the whole,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is what you have at the end of the program. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that was it on our questions for you, Dimo. So I'm really hoping that our participants really enjoyed that because I thought it was fascinating. I think there's so much there that obviously it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour and it went very quickly. It would be lovely to sit and really explore some of those themes, which I'm guessing is what you'll do in the classroom. I know you're teaching the MBA students later on this afternoon, so you'll be starting to explore some of these ideas with them. And anyone who's on the call who would like to connect with our students, obviously you can do that and ask their opinions of what they are learning from Dimo and the rest of our teaching team around this idea of navigating the future. So I would like to say, Dimo, thank you so much for such an inspiring and thought-provoking session. I will definitely try and be more creative and open-minded and playful when I am looking at my daily workload, especially those emails that always pile up in my email box. For anyone on the call, if you would like to connect with Dimo or with myself, you can find us on LinkedIn. And for the Bath MBA, if you would like to find out any more about the Bath MBA, please visit our website. There's some links in the chat box. Or, like I say, you can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I'd be very happy to pick up another conversation with you. So thank you, Dimo. That was really fascinating, really enjoyable. And we will see you again soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Take care. Have a good rest of your day.